Well, welcome everyone to the WellWaveNOW podcast. We're here with Dr. Runge. He's going to be our special guest coming up, but we wanted to get to know and his background, where he came from, and why he's doing what he does today. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Tim. Great to be here. Just call me Marshall. We'll be informal here.
Okay. Well, I got dressed up for you though,
Yeah,
Dr. Marshall. So,
you look sharp.
yeah, thank you. But now, so tell us about where did you grow up?
I grew up in Austin, Texas. Um, my parents were both from Texas and had a pretty normal childhood, as normal as you can get. This was back in the 60s primarily. And great place. It was Austin was small then. As before it was the Austin of today, you wouldn't recognize the old Austin, mainly a college town with the state government was there. So it was a great place to grow up. My paternal grandparents, their parents had immigrated from Germany back when they were giving away land in Texas. And so they had a ranch, and I loved going out to that ranch. In fact, my initial goal as about a 6 or 7 year old was to become a cowboy, but I failed.
Did you go up riding a horse though? At least do that.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Horses and donkeys. We had donkeys and spent a lot of time outdoors.
Well, tell us about you have siblings, the other family members?
Yep. I have a brother and a sister. Um, my brother now spends half his time on the family ranch, and he spends the other half of his time in Zurich. So
wow.
there's a different life for you. That's him. I have a sister who everybody spends half their time in Texas. Well, I don't spend half my time there. I spend some of my time there. But my sister and her husband live in San Antonio part of the time, and they live in Durham, North Carolina, where one of their kids lives and their grandchildren live.
Come with the family history out of Germany, and were there any sort of German traditions that you think the family picked up, or anything that you carry? Like for example, I grew up, like we mentioned one time, in Grand Island, Nebraska, which was actually settled by the Germans, and German pancakes were big there, and so used to make those in the village inn.
Yeah, lots of great traditions. So there was a time when their heritage was to have candles on a Christmas tree rather than lights. So somewhere when I was pretty young, I don't think a Christmas tree actually burned up, but there was concern about that, so it stopped having that. They had a lot of holiday traditions around Christmas, and a lot of them were around food. I'd never had a German pancake, but they had these. My grandmother made these cookies. My mother made these cookies that were called Springeles, and they have stamp. Well, it's kind of like a stamp, and so they have a scene. They're small cookies, about inch and a half by an inch and a half, and they have kind of a scene on them. That was great fun. On my other side of the family, which was also largely German, my grandfather used to come and dress up as Santa Claus. And so for a number of years, that was very entertaining. I mean, he didn't come down the chimney, but to have Santa Claus show up at the house, that was pretty cool.
That does sound really fun. So growing up, did you get involved in sports, music? What was your extracurricular?
Sports. I love sports. I played basketball and football through high school. And the sport that I turned out to be best at, I had dreams of being an All-American at the University of Texas, All-American football player. That didn't work out. But I did become a college tennis player. So I played tennis through college. I went to college at Vanderbilt University in the Southeast Conference. So it was a great tennis place. I really enjoyed that.
You still play today?
A little bit. When our kids were little, I used to get out and play more, and I play occasionally. My favorite opponent is a ball machine. It never misses. It never complains that I didn't hit the ball back to it.
Yep.
It's a good workout.
Well, Vandy for undergrad, so that's the Harvard of the South, right?
Yeah, at Vanderbilt they used to call Harvard the Vanderbilt of the North, but
okay, there we go. Yeah, perfect. But so then when did you transition? Let's go into your professional career. Where did you go to medical school?
Well, before I went to medical school, I had become enchanted with research. I started doing some research as sort of a pre-med type thing. I loved research, so I decided to do a stay at Vanderbilt, and I got a PhD in molecular biology. It was very early in the days of molecular biology. My wife, meanwhile, was in medical school, and so during this period of time, we weren't married yet, but we were dating, and I thought, well, medical school looks pretty cool. So I then went from Vanderbilt and went to medical school at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. It was the first time for my wife and I that either of us had really ever been north of Tennessee. So we considered Baltimore way north, although most people in Baltimore, they're kind of on the Mason-Dixon line. So I went to medical school at Hopkins. We loved Baltimore. We loved Hopkins. It had a little bit of adjustment for two kids who came from smaller towns in the South. But we ended up loving Baltimore, loved Johns Hopkins. I did my internal medicine residency there also. And then, on a whim, we went to Boston. I did my cardiology training at Massachusetts General Hospital. So that was kind of all my formal training.
So if you take it through all that time, through the childhood, going to college of molecular biology, then taking the medical route, who would you say had the biggest influence on your life, Marshall?
I'll tell you two people. So one person was the chairman of medicine at Johns Hopkins. His name was Victor McCusick. He was from Maine, kind of an eclectic guy, a brilliant guy. And he sort of started medical genetics. But what I remember most about him is he seemed formal, but could be very informal. And so when I was a medical student, the first day in taking the internal medicine rotation, he had us all come to his conference room, and he had a big bowl of apples. And he said, "I'm going to teach you how to eat an apple." And apparently his father or uncle or somebody had an apple farm in Maine. His version of eating an apple, you ate the whole thing, the seeds, the stem. Well, that was kind of him. But he was a wonderful guy and really had a great impression on me. And then when I was a cardiology fellow, head of cardiology was a physician scientist named Edgar Haber, really a brilliant guy, also kind of a bit of a unique person. But he was somebody that for years and years, I could call for advice if I was having difficulty with anything, with a patient, with a research problem. And so he's somebody that I really count as a person who, and Victor McCusick as well, that they encourage people to pick up the phone, give them a call, and they took the time to be helpful.
So Marshall, where did the majority of your practice in cardiology happen?
Well, after a year at Mass General, my wife and I, she was working full time. She was a cardiac anesthesiologist, and we had 3 children, we couldn't afford it. So we decided to go south. We went to Emory. Emory, a lot of people don't know, but has had a fantastic cardiac program for a long time. Before and then after, they recruited the father of angioplasty, who came to Emory from Switzerland, Andreas Grunzig. And so had a great time there. We stayed there 5 years. Then my mother was from Galveston, Texas. And I got a call one day saying, "Hey, we'd really like you to come to Galveston." And we went there and really enjoyed Galveston. We were there 6 years. And I'd say during those that total of 11 or 12 years, I had very large clinical practice in cardiology. Then from Galveston, I got another call one day that University of North Carolina had a search for a chairman of medicine, that they hadn't gotten the person they wanted, and would I be interested in it? And so lo and behold, I ended up at the University of North Carolina. We lived in Chapel Hill for 15 years. I learned to love ACC basketball.
Yep.
I hadn't been someone in Texas. It's all about football, but I hadn't been such a basketball fan. But my sister, meanwhile, and brother-in-law were both at Duke, and so we finally had to agree. We just were not going to talk about basketball.
Yep.
So we stayed there 15 years, and then I've been at University of Michigan for 10 years now.
Okay, so so you brought all together a number of places, took that history and had an impact in various places. And now you're juggling a few things, right? You're an author, you still practice a little bit, you have to have the school there. What's kind of the essence of your work in health and wellness today? And what do you personally get out of it?
A couple of things. So I in my role, I have to deal with all kinds of financial and operational issues about the medical school and the health system. What I enjoy most is working with people. And I'm fortunate to be surrounded by a bunch of really highly talented people, and most of them are, really great people. And so there are times that I can help them with something. There are times that they can help me. I do also want to tell you something that I started in North Carolina, and I just have been continuing here recently. When I was in North Carolina, there's a type of health center called Federally Qualified Health Centers, FQHC, and they're sponsored by they're supported by the federal government. They provide health care for people who largely, but not exclusively, don't have great health care insurance or come from a disadvantaged area. But what I enjoyed the patient population, but also what I tremendously enjoyed was those health centers. They do such a great job of providing a medical home. So it's not just the doctor or the nurse or the physical therapist or the social worker. They all come together, and I'll tell you, I think some of the best healthcare in America occurs at those clinics, which most people think, well, why would I go to one of those clinics? I can afford to go to the Taj Mahal, but I'll tell you what, they do a great job. Last summer, I had a really wonderful experience, unique and wonderful experience. And that is I spent a week, and I'm going to go back and spend more time in the near future. Spent a week in Shiprock, New Mexico. So Shiprock, New Mexico is on the Navajo Nation, a huge reservation. They're their own nation. They have their tribal police. They have, all the things they do. And there's a health center there that's part of the Indian Health Services. They still call it the Indian Health Service. Um, and it reminded me so much of the experiences I had in these federally qualified health centers, which is the hospital I was at in Shiprock, called the Northern New Mexico Health Center. About 60 inpatient beds. It's primary care. The doctors who were there, I worked with internal medicine. They trained at great places. 3 of them trained at the University of Michigan. Had people from Duke, from Penn, all kinds of places, and some from the University of New Mexico. But what really impressed me is that their commitment. So the people who've been there for the least amount of time had been there for 7 years. Some people had been there 25 years since that health center opened. When I was in medical school, I kind of thought about joining the public health service for the noblest of all reasons, which was they would pay your tuition. That wasn't the noblest of all reasons, of course, but I didn't do it. I figured out how I could get by without that. But I'd always thought about doing that because I had friends who had gone for a year or two and they really enjoyed it, but then they got on with their life. Now, at this point in my life, I think that I'd like to spend a lot more time doing that kind of healthcare because it's, it also, none of the medical records are easy to work with. The nurses, the doctors, they have time to spend time with patients. That's a big challenge for people in healthcare now. They get to know their patients and their families. To get healthcare there, you have to be a tribal member. Most are Navajo, a few are from other tribes, but everything is paid for. So if they need medications, they have a pharmacy right there. If they have something really bad, they go to another hospital and they get everything paid for. And to me, and I wrote about this in this book that I just finished for Forbes, it restored my confidence that America can have great healthcare because, and I think this is very relevant to what you both are interested in. They really care about preventive health. They really care about wellness. And they really care about how do we keep people well so they don't enter the health system. I mean, we have to take care of chronic disease, and America does a great job of that. But I think the salvation for American healthcare is if we can do what you guys are doing and really keep people healthier. And what's a big surprise to me, I got to tell you one last thing, sorry, is that you see these pictures of Native Americans or indigenous peoples who the pictures they show, they look terribly overweight and unhappy. That was not the case at Shiprock. It's interesting because among the Navajo, diabetes is very common, but they're not generally really overweight. They just have a tendency toward diabetes. But boy, they get wonderful health care.
Well, Marsh, we really do want to see the pendulum swing from being reactive to being proactive, right, in health. And that's really our whole mission with WellWaveNOW. So thanks for recognizing that. Last question before we get into rapid fire, which is kind of a fun thing we do here. But Marshall, any dream project or a goal that you have as you finish up your career?
Well, you may decide not to have rapid fire. You may decide to have me certified. So I have 3 goals. One is to spend much more time with my wife, our children, and our grandchildren than I've been able to do in my entire career. A second is I want to focus my efforts in healthcare around populations like those at the federally qualified health centers or it's in Shiprock. And I think I have something to offer. I'm not going to try to restart a research program. I'm happy to teach young learners, but of all things, for a cardiologist, what I want to do is to get much closer to your side of the pendulum and work on wellness. And there are cardiologists who are in preventive healthcare. And so we have a clinic here and I'll do some of that. The last thing is I found late in life that I do really enjoy writing. So some is nonfiction like this Forbes book, but I have also published 1 novel and I'm working on a 2nd novel. And the fabulous thing, I highly recommend it to anybody writing fiction because there's no fact checking. You can just make up whatever you want. And for me, it's such a release. My first novel that I wrote it. I thought it was really good. And I took it home and asked my wife to read it. She read about 30, 40 pages and she said, well, there are about 100 characters in here. They're all nasty people and there's no plot. And so I kind of knew that. So my first few years of writing a novel, anytime anybody made me angry at work, they became a character. So there wasn't necessarily a plot. I had all these characters that were just terrible people. So learned a little bit from that.
That's hilarious. Excellent. Well, best of luck in your pursuits and in achieving those three goals of yours. How many grandchildren do you have?
We have 7.
Oh, that's amazing. Amazing.
And they're still, the oldest is only 11, so they're still in that age range where, their parents are great and their grandparents are great. Another couple of years they'll be like, bug off.
Possibly, yeah. Hopefully you'll always have a close relationship with them. All right, here we go. Rapid fire. Are you more of an early bird or a night owl?
Definitely early bird.
Early bird. Okay. Do you prefer the mountains or beach?
I prefer the mountains.
Okay.
I love them both, but I prefer the mountains.
Okay, excellent. And do you prefer coffee, tea, or something else? What's in your cup, doctor?
My cup has tea in it. Close to my cup is I'm embarrassed to say, a Diet Dr. Pepper. So
you are from Texas. You are from Texas.
That's right. Oh, you have a good knowledge. Dr. Pepper started in Waco, Texas, of all places.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I sadly drink too much caffeine, but my favorites are tea and Diet Cola.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I'm a big fan. That's my one weakness is Dr. Pepper, probably. It used to be
good for you. I have good for you. I have many weaknesses.
Well, Marshall, it's been a pleasure to have you on to get more of your history and your backstory. We look forward to your full podcast coming up in just a week. And so we'll look forward to getting to know you even better at that time. So thanks so much for being our guest today on the WellWave Now podcast. And remember, wellness, it's in you.